Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. We have here is Heather. She's my student that is doing our hospital admin rotations. I thought it'd be a fun idea just to do a video with her, and this is her third rotations out of the 7th.
Yeah.
Right? So it'd be fun to have her kind of giving you guys some tips and tricks on P4 year as well as some residency advice, as that's what she's thinking of pursuing. The format for today is just going to ask you, I'll ask you a series of questions and then she'll answer, and then if there's anything at the end that she would like to add and comment. So before I start, I want Heather to introduce herself so you guys know who she is and where she's at.
So my name is Heather. I'm a P4 student at the University of Houston College of Pharmacy, and as mentioned, I'm on my 3rd rotation, which is Advanced Hospital.
So think of maybe a year ago in your P3 year, how did you prepare for rotations? And before we start there, can you tell me what rotations that you have had, or tell the audience?
So I have had 2 rotations. I had my internal med and my hospital pharmacy management rotation. And as for preparing for rotations, it's more of course, depending on the rotation, you can ask your preceptor when you email them, and usually ask them, what do you expect? What do they expect from you? They'll probably tell you, things to look at beforehand. But also during your P3 year, I would say, especially for your clinical rotations, to study as if you're going to learn and be able to apply it than just studying for the grade. Because I think I tend to do that, we're focused so much on our grades that, we realize that this is going to be our future, so we can't just focus on studying just for the A and forget about it. So that's my main thing. Study as if you're learning and keep it.
But you're applying the information. And I like it that Heather mentioned, email your preceptor 1 to 2 weeks before and ask, especially in clinical rotations. Some preceptors, when I was in internal medicine, I have some articles and things that I would recommend my students to read ahead of time, just so you're caught up. It also depends on where you're at in your rotations. If you're in the spring where you already have had several clinical rotations, you may be more ready compared to if it's your first clinical rotation, you're a bit more nervous, right?
Yeah.
And pulling out those notes and getting those guidelines are always helpful. For hospital rotations or non-clinical rotations, there may not be clinical things that you have to learn, but for example, for our hospital rotations, we incorporate a transitions of care component, which includes medication history, medication reconciliations, and discharge education. So with Heather, when she contacted me 2 weeks before, I asked her to look up top 200 drugs that are most commonly used and side effects and some counseling points, just to get you a good start.
And that is helpful, yes, because I'm doing that right now.
And I really like the fact that, learn it as if you're applying it. Most of the time when through the past 3 years or 6 or 5 years, depending on which program, your 4 or 6 year program, you learn for grades, you learn to have to take a test, but when you actually have a real patient in front of you and trying to apply the information and talk to patient and use not medical terminology and explain to them in a way that they understand, and making sure that they are going to be adhering to the medication. So learning to apply the information is very important. So with that, we're gonna go to the next. It's similar to rotation advice, but what are some extracurricular activities that you do, and how you get involved with different organizations at your school?
So for me, I think regardless, joining any organization that you're interested in, so there's obviously the big umbrella ones like APHA, SNAFA. Those, I feel like those are very good to join because, it's like the overarching kind of organizations, and there's also smaller organizations depending on what you want to focus on. There's NCPA, which is more about independent pharmacies, AMCP, also like MAPSA, and all these other organizations that you can join. But the main thing is, regardless of which organization you want to join, is to network and always meet people. I think that was really helpful when P2 year. I was one of the social chairs for NCPA, and I had to host the meet and greet events with pharmacists, and you get to actually talk to them and get their advice on how they become independent pharmacists and how they open their own pharmacy. So this is just one side of it. This is just one organization, but any organization, just depending on your interests, it will be very beneficial as long as reach out to people.
So Heather mentioned quite a number of organizations, and there are quite a bit out there. I think it also depends on what you're feel comfortable with, and especially your first year, try to not get involved in everything, because if you're interested in everything, I would try at least maybe 1 to 2 or even 3 and see how that goes, and your interest will change, and Heather can tell you that, and we'll ask about that later, but your interest will change or may change, so get involved with 2 or 3 just to get your feet grounded. And I really like the important point of networking. Networking is not merely just talk to someone, get their business card, and that's not really a true networking. My definition of networking is building relationships. And when you're on rotation, you're really networking because you get to see preceptors, director of pharmacy, manager, clinical pharmacists, potential future employers, right? And also your colleagues or peers that you in the future will work with. So really building relationships, follow up them via email or via phone. Just continue to keep in touch with them. When you organization-wise, you may have a lot of speakers going to different organizations. So being a leader, what could be a chair or be an officer, or even like being a member and trying to volunteer for different projects, just to get you more engaged. The biggest thing is building relationship with folks and keep in touch with them, and so they know who you are at the end of the day. And when you need your help or need some advice, you can reach out and say, hey Anne, I was your student a few months ago and I have some question with you. And I would tell you most preceptors would be more than happy to lend a helping hand or give you advice, because I was there and I had a lot of great mentors that had helped me, and it's my way of paying it forward. And this is also the reason why we also doing this video for you guys. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the residency track. So I know Heather, when I first met her, she was on the fence about doing residency. So can you kind of tell me a little bit about your thought process and your journey thus far, and what are regarding residency?
So for
and
me,
your deciding factors.
Okay. So yes, originally I didn't really consider residency, mainly because I was already working in retail, and I do enjoy working in retail, but of course, once you start rotations, and you meet people, like she said, it really kind of changes your perspective on, what you want to do after you graduate. So for me, I think starting my rotation, my clinical rotations really didn't push me to, do a residency. And also personally, I do want to have more training. I know I'll be a pharmacist when I graduate, but also that year, I believe you'll gain a lot from talking to residents, and just, I want to be that person, I want to be a pharmacist that can take care of patients. And so that's why I feel like for residency, I would really for myself, I chose to want to do residency afterwards.
Right. On my channel, I have a video on 4 factors you should consider when doing a residency. Everybody's reason will be different, so you got to choose what is right for you. There's, finance that involved, there is the time that is involved, the commitment. But if you're able to do it, I would recommend it if you have the flexibility and the capability to do it. It is 1 year, but it will gives you more latitude in your career, and even for upward movement into clinical pharmacist. In a big medical center, they may prefer, PGY2 trained for specialized, but in community hospitals or smaller rural areas, even having a residency will, 1 year residency may be enough. So it really depends on what your goals are, and residency is not for everyone. As you mentioned, Heather said that she worked in retail and that's what she's interested in initially, and maybe residency may not be a thing for her, but now she's more interested in working in hospital and more clinical. Residency may be the right journey to take, and just to build your what I would say clinical skills as well. So how did you start looking for programs and figure out what you want to do?
So that's something I'm still working on. I was gonna ask Anne, but I know from just looking on where to start, there is an ASHP residency online directory you can look up. It tells you, asks you if you wanted to do PGY1 or PGY2, or you're interested in both, and then also asks if you're interested in a specific I forgot, what do you call it?
Specialty.
Specialty. Yeah, so that's great place to start. And also talking to, your classmates above you, like the graduating class, or just like any upperclassmen, you can probably talk to them and they can give you advice too. So that's what I was doing.
Mm-hmm. And in addition to P4, where you have opportunities 6 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on your school format for rotation, you have that 4 or 6 weeks to live through that rotation or through that specialty that you're interested in. For those that are not on rotation yet, you may do what is it called now, externship or internship, which I know is mainly hospital or community. The other opportunities for P1 to P3 is to look for clinical pharmacist or other types of pharmacists role that you're interested in and shadow them. Some hospital may or may not let you do it due to confidentiality, but they're more than happy to sit down with you and, for 30 minutes or an hour over coffee, talking about different roles, their responsibilities, kind of learn about their journey, because that may inspire you or even guide you to the right way.
Just whoever you meet, if you just reach out to them, they will be probably more than happy to offer like shadowing, like Anne said.
Mm-hmm. Have you shadowed anyone in the past?
No, but like I do know that if they, it would be good if they do say offer. It's a good opportunity to bring that up.
Yes, and don't be shy. If you're interested, just ask. The worst answer you'll get is a no. The best answer is a yes. Even if you can't meet face to face, you can also do over the phone, or if it's a quick question or etc., it could be over email. So there are a lot of ways to connect with someone, or even FaceTime. You may not meet with them in person, but FaceTime is the closest thing you can get, and still get to see that facial expression and whatnot. A few things kind of mention about looking at programs. If you're not sure, you're on the fence, of course, start out with first year is good. There are some programs out there that has PGY1 and PGY2 in the same facility. If you are so determined that you're going to be an ID specialist, then I would recommend look at programs that has both, just so you don't have to reapply to other programs. But it's just a good thing if they have two programs and that's what you're interested in. It kind of, because you're there for a year, they know you well compared to other candidates, and you perform well, the likelihood of you getting matched there is high. So those are something to think about. And then geography, if you're flexible to be moved or you're willing to move to other locations, that will help a lot. So those are something to consider as well. I know Heather kind of mentioned here about having co-residents or just being one-on-one with your preceptor. What do you mean by that?
So I know, on rotation you'll get it too, right? Having another intern with you on the same rotation, just so that's kind of like having a co-resident to see, it helps with bouncing back ideas. If you have a preceptor that tells you to work on a project, it might having like someone else to talk about it with, or if you just want to be like the only resident, so the preceptor focuses most of the effort and time on you to teach you. So it just depends on, some programs offer, more than one resident or just one resident too. So depends on how your learning style is.
Right. And most of the time, many programs out there are having more than one resident. If you start with a new program, most likely they're going to start with just one resident. So the size of the family is also important to consider. And there's some other things that Heather asked me when we met one-on-one. I kind of want to share is what other things about residency. So the other essential items I would say that you guys should start thinking regarding residency is look at the staffing schedule. How does that align? Do you staff every week, every other weekend, or you staff every third? Because it does come in play. And something is, what are some sponsored educational activities that you'd be attending? Meaning, what are some paid conferences and stuff that you'd be able to go? Because that would be something that will be value added in professional development. Other things that quality of life wise, like I said, work-life balance, integration, but like parking, how does that align? Is that something that you pay for? How are PTO being allocated in terms of days off? So those are a few things outside of the normal questions that you should ask residents. One thing too is before mid-year, which is crazy, when you have lots of programs to choose and lots of residents to talk about, I would do some prep work. Meaning, start thinking about what are some of your interests. You know, I would not apply to no more than 20. I applied to 10 and thought that was good for me. But you also have to consider finance, meaning when you apply and you got accepted, you gotta go for interviews, right? So, and most programs don't pay for you to stay at hotels or airplane tickets or car ride. Very limited programs do, but most of them will have you pay on your own. So think about that too on the number of programs you apply for, because that will matter. What I usually tell students is that if you're interested in a program and you're not entirely sure, I would just say go ahead and apply. I did that for myself, and then I got an interview offer, but then I realized that I have other interests and this program was not high on my list, so I sent a thank you but no thank you. And it's okay too. I mean, it's not inappropriate to do that, because it's better to apply to a program and then just wait instead of not apply and then you really wanted that program. So that's what I would suggest to do as well. So think of some programs, make an Excel spreadsheet, narrow down, start talking to residents if you can, if especially they're local here, and just reach out to them. Most of the residents can be found on like a homepage of the hospital with their emails. So just say, hey, can I chat with you for 20 minutes about the program? Because when you wait until mid-year or showcase, they'll be talking to like 100 plus candidates. So it's hard to make that statement. So if you are here locally and they're here locally, I would recommend either do a site visit or just email them and talk on the phone just to ask a few questions to gauge your interest and how the atmosphere is a part of it too is the fit, right? When people tell me, oh, you know that hunch when you're in the right, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what hunch? Like, I don't get it. Now I'm telling folks the same thing, like you will feel it based on the fit, the people, the atmosphere, how people treat you, and it's important because you're there for a year and you want to be fit, like and you want to make sure that you enjoy being there with the people. All right, our last question of the day will be, what makes you stand out as a job applicant? So I'm going to ask Heather for that. What do you think would be job applicant or a resident applicant?
Definitely, like, have your CV prepared, and of course be able to talk about those experiences. Like, if you have a huge CV, but if they ask you what is the most like memorable thing you've done and you have nothing to say, then it's kind of like, are you just there to put on your CV, or did you truly enjoy the experience and understood what was going on, and just showing that you're going to conferences, any like events that you have talked to pharmacists or any residents. I feel like that will help you stand out as a job applicant. I'm not anything else to add.
Yeah. So let me dive in before I kind of give my 2 cents. How did you prepare your CV, and how many people have looked at your CV at this point?
So I had a resident look at it, and I prepared it, of course, for P1 year. I prepared it once. And then every year I do, like, after rotation, I would update it just to make sure I don't forget.
Good.
And so also in P3 year, you'll have a resident look at it. And also before the rotation started, I think I asked them to look at it once more. So at least, every single time it'll be recent before your next rotation.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Yes, that would be something I recommend, is have it updated so you don't forget things you do, especially when you're involved in various organizations like community services and different positions that you held. I know at U of H they may be a little special with the program with the resident. Is that structured?
Yeah.
So that's a structured program, and not every school is like that. Some school may not have a structured program that have you work on your CV or have someone looked at it. So what I would recommend is also reach out to your faculty that you have worked with closely, that knows you, and have them look at that. Or if you have
if you work and have your pharmacist,
you have your pharmacist look at it. Having a resident is good, but I will also have a practitioner looking at it too, just because they have additional perspective on critical eye on what to look for in the CV. In addition, there are several programs out there. If you're in Texas, they have a mentor-mentee program. So if you sign up for that program, ask your mentor to look at it. And then I know if you're involved with ASHP, ASHP also have a biannual CV review. So those are all very good opportunities to have your CV looked at, because if you do a P1 year and then P4 year, there's all that gaps and you will forget. The other thing is when you're on rotation or during your work experience or when you're on your IPE rotations, what I recommend students to do is kind of notate on their major interventions, major projects. With Heather, I have Fun Feedback Friday, so I kind of somewhat force her, but basically she kind of having her feedback on things she learned, things she wants to improve, and then projects she worked on, and she created basically a document. So at the end of rotation, she has something that she can look back on, and that could be something for the interviews. Not all preceptor ask you to do this, and it helped me a lot when I did it, so now I'm just passing it on to my student. Those are something to consider, because when you finish with your rotation, sometimes you don't remember what you did, right? So even journaling down, it could be, if you're want to write it, you can write on a journal, or if you are a phone person, you can write on notes on like what 1 or 2 things I learned today, because they accumulate.
Even if your pharmacist doesn't ask you, you should still write it anyways after every rotation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's kind of what I do. I do an Excel sheet and I just write all the things I've done.
Good. Work experience would help to, because as an employer right now, when I hire people, I only not to look at their grades. I look at them as a whole applicant, holistic, like what are their work experiences, what are their organization involvement, what are their leadership skills. Of course grades, but again, I don't base off only on grades. Even when I interview for residency, I don't look at grades alone. Of course, if you have a 2.0, I may question, but I mean, I take overall like the whole package. So I would rather choose someone who's 3.0 but super involved, have work experience, versus a 4.0 but has no work experience, nothing, kind of like a bookworm. From that standpoint, like that would be my preference. And my mentor once said, hire for attitude and train for skills. And most of the pharmacy students, you guys are very bright. You guys can be taught on a lot of things, but I can't teach you to be nice. So that's something I definitely assess. And I would say other employers or managers or directors would do the same. In terms of recommendation letters for residency, I would always recommend to have at least 1 clinical pharmacist or clinical preceptor for you because first of all, for residency, they want to look at how strong you are clinically. So it's always nice to have a clinical preceptor, but in the end is really getting 3 folks that really know who you are and speaks really well and highly recommend. That's the key piece. Highly recommend you for the position. So it could be your boss at your Walgreens, it could be your faculty that you've been known for 4 years, it could be your preceptor that you know only for a month but you did like amazing job at rotation. One thing I would say is when you ask them, just ask them, can you write me a good letter of recommendation? Not just can you write me a letter of recommendation, can you write me a good letter of recommendation? And most preceptors will tell you yes or no. If you're not a great student, they're probably like, they would tell you if they're able to write or not. So first of all, ask them, can you write me a good letter of recommendations? And then give them a lot of heads up. I would say at least 2 to 4 weeks notice, and given all the documentation that's needed, lay it out organized, put the deadline, highlight it, because preceptors sometimes we may not see everything, and so it's always appreciated for reminders. So those are some tips that I would say overall. And one last piece is really get to know the people and follow up. So after your interviews, regardless residency or job, send a thank you letter saying how much you appreciate the time they have, and if you have the person's, ask for the person's business card if you can. Most of the folks don't send thank you cards or follow up, so if you do it, again, you will stand out.
Yeah.
Any other comments or advice that you want to give to your peers?
I think Anne covered a lot of it. But yeah, it depends on a lot of these questions. It really depends on, your situation in life, what you're looking for, your personal goal. So everything that we say here isn't, these are just a guide, but ultimately depends on, what you want to, do after when you graduate. So
right. And your life will change, or your interest might change. I have friends who actually went and worked in retail and realized, you know what, I want to do a residency, and she went back and did a residency. So it's not impossible. Everything is possible as you set your mind to it, and you know the right people and know the right persons to get in contact. So the main important thing is that you know what you want and you go for it, and having mentors along the way to help you. I hope you find this video helpful, and if you have any comments or questions, please post it below. If you want for future videos, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Let me